Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and I'm coming to you with another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted. And as I have just advertised, I guess you could say, this conversation today on Facebook only. I only advertise it on Facebook. I have Brian Townsend with me, and I normally don't read bios. And I just told Brian before we went on camera that if I read his whole bio, we would be here for all day because he has such extensive experience. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph and then I'll let Brian fill in the gaps and then I'll say hello officially to Brian after I read this first paragraph. Brian Townsend is an international speaker, trainer, and consultant with extensive experience in a variety of settings. Most recently, he was a special agent with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. For 28 years, Brian has served in law enforcement roles at both the local and federal levels. First, he served as a police officer in Joplin, Missouri. After 5 years in Joplin, he earned a position with the DEA, where he spent 23 years and held a variety of roles with increasing responsibility. So, Brian, I am so glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm happy to be here. Look forward to it.
Well, I'm glad. And you have tell people, fill in the gaps. Tell people a little bit more about you than what I just read, because there's a whole lot more about you that you've done.
Sure. I started my law enforcement career in Southwest Missouri. I did that for 5 years. As you said, I use that as a stepping stone to the DEA. Not that you need law enforcement experience prior to DEA, but it certainly helped in my case, I think. Went to DEA, spent 23 years there in a variety of assignments. Started in Arkansas. I went to Texas, went back to Virginia, and then finally I came to Springfield, Missouri, where I was the resident agent in charge. So I was in charge of the office in Springfield and the counties in Southwest Missouri under our area of responsibility. Excuse me. I retired a few years ago and put on a couple different hats at retirement. So the first hat I put on was Eagle Six Training, which is a training and consulting business, which I still run, still operate. And then I started working initially part-time for an intelligence center in the Midwest. And our job is to support law enforcement in 9 states. And my job specifically was to train them. And that ended up going from part-time to full-time, which I still do. And then one of the classes that I put on, some of the curriculum I was building was drug specific because of my career with DEA.
Yeah.
And I put on some training specifically on opioids and fentanyl. And then that really took off. And then that led to the next hat that I wear, which is the founder and president of Only 2MG, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness of illicit fentanyl and other public safety threats. So don't sleep much.
Yeah, I can imagine retirement uh, isn't really rocking in a chair for you, is it?
No, it's not. And I'm
You're
okay
too
with
young for that anyway.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. That's what everybody tells me. I love DEA. It was a great career. I loved working in law enforcement, active in law enforcement. I'm still working with law enforcement, just, training capacity now. But I just knew I had other things I needed to do. I need other chapters in my book, if you will, that I needed to write. So I left when I could, very happy with my career and just wanted to kind of write the next part of my life on my terms, and I am definitely busier now, but I control my schedule and I love that. I love to travel. I love to be out there, to meet people, speak. It's just I'm just enjoying life.
Yeah, you've designed it the way you want it to be. It's not being designed for you. Your retirement is being designed by you that fits within your experience and your love.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned Eagle Six training, and we're going to cover that a little bit later. And that is all about leadership development. And I want to start out by talking about only 2MG. And that's a nonprofit, like you said, that addresses substance abuse, especially fentanyl. And I just happened in my research for this episode, I saw a LinkedIn post that said somebody had said, "You have spent most of this year on airplanes traveling the country to talk with young people, first responders, and community leaders about the dangers of illicit fentanyl." So let's cover why only 2 mg and just let's dive into the deep end of fentanyl.
Yeah, I wanted to give back in some way. I've always felt like my purpose is public safety in some way or another. And wearing a badge and gun with as a police officer in DEA, I was able to serve my community and had to figure out a way to do that post law enforcement, and my role with the intelligence center really kind of helped play into that. Because like I said, I was building curriculum for them and teaching, drug specific classes, and I developed an opioids class, and it just took off, and it really resonated really well. And then so we took it from law enforcement or the first responder community into the public, and it just did really well. People really crave this information,
Yeah,
and then from
why?
there, I
Why?
think there's a lack of information out there, lack of accurate information out there, and at the same time, what are we hearing in the news all the time? A record number of people, being killed from drugs. We lost 80,000 people last year to drugs. The year before was 105,000 people. And when you dive deeper into those numbers, you're looking at about 75% of those people lost their lives because of one drug. And what I tell people all the time is, after 30 years in law enforcement, I've never seen a drug more impactful. I've never seen a drug change the landscape like fentanyl has. It's just taken over. It's
Yeah.
just devastated families, devastated communities. So there was this combination of me wanting to figure out how I can give back. And also, there's a demand for this information because it's so relevant and because it's impacting so many people. I mean, I can remember when I go into seminars, conferences, training sessions, and ask, hey, is anyone here, know anyone, whether it's their own family or whether it's, their neighborhood or whatever, that's been impacted. And you'd have a couple hands, raise up. But now when I ask that, I mean, if you don't raise your hand, you're the exception to the rule. So, I
Yes.
mean, this is something that's really, really devastating this country. And I know that my background with DEA and my experience can put butts in the chairs, right? Can put people in the seats. They want to hear the stories. They want to hear the information. So if I can use that to provide good information, especially young people, provide them really good knowledge. So empower them to be in positions where they're forced to make these difficult choices, and at least they have the information up there. They may not use it. I'm not naive to think they're all going to say no, but at least they have that information. So I think it's a critical time to share it, and I'm happy to be part of that solution.
Yeah, and that brings up a question as you were saying that is our country has seen cocaine, a ton of cocaine. It's seen, meth. It's seen a whole bunch of drugs. Why is fentanyl the one? Why is that so prevalent?
There's many reasons, but the biggest reason is how little it takes to kill the average person. I mean, the reason we call it our nonprofit only 2 mg is because only 2 milligrams is the average or the dose that could kill you. I mean, obviously, if you built a tolerance to drugs, and some other factors, it's going to take a little bit more than 2 milligrams. But the average person, if you've never used drugs in your life or used fentanyl in your life, 2 milligrams is it. That's it. And now let's dive deeper into what 2 milligrams is. We're talking about a couple of granules of salt or sand. We're talking about the tip of a pen. So, and that found its way into our drug supply. There's a whole history here on this, but found its way into our drug supply via heroin, took over. I mean, if you can find heroin in the United States, congratulations, because it's really rare to get heroin anymore. And if you do find it, about 75 to 80% of the chance, 75 to 80% of the time, it's going to have fentanyl in it. But more importantly, as it took over heroin, then it started to grow tentacles. It got into our counterfeit pill supply. So now we're seeing it, 5 out of 10 counterfeit pills that have fentanyl in them have at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill you. It's found its way into our cocaine. It's found its way into our methamphetamine. I mean, it's just devastated our illicit drug supply. And illicit drugs are bad, but they're worse now than they ever have been. And unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors out there who are, I don't know if there's a contest or what's going on, but they're sitting around thinking about how deadly can they make the next pills, right? So now we see the nitazines, the carfentanil, the xylazine. I mean, there's so many. That's why we don't just cover fentanyl. We cover, emerging public safety threats because we're seeing it all. But fentanyl was really the game changer. Absolutely the game changer.
Yeah, and how does it get into Excedrin? I mean, like I know somebody that their son died of taking, a friend gave them some Excedrin. He had a headache. The friend didn't know they had had Excedrin with laced with fentanyl. How does it get into average pills that we take every day and you just don't know?
Well, those are all counterfeit, and the problem is all the pills out there. There's a counterfeit of. I don't care if it's Xanax. I don't care if it's Adderall, Oxy, Perk, whatever it is. There's going to be a counterfeit because for many reasons, that a lot of traffickers know that some people, especially young people, aren't going to go to mom and dad, aren't going to go to a doctor. They're just going to go to their drug dealer and think that they're going to get the same thing, and they're not. Most of these pills don't have what you think they have in them. Most of them have fentanyl, methamphetamine, or some type of filler or garbage or poison in them.
Okay.
And that's the problem is it's just, you were talking about a drug in a small amount that can kill people that made its way into our pills. So stories like that are unfortunately way too common. They're devastating, they're depressing, but that's the reality of this drug and what it's done. It's just taken over more so than any other. We had the crack boom in the 80s, and we saw heroin after, let's say, Vietnam War. I mean, you can go back in history and look at these spikes, but this one's different. This one has really been impactful because of how devastating it is when you look at how small of amount it takes to kill the average human being. And it's not that it does it. You know what I mean? Like I can say, yeah, that only takes 2 milligrams, but we're seeing the consequences of that, right? When
Mhm.
80, 82, 80,000 people, 80 to 82,000 people lost their lives, like I said, last year, and 105,000 the year before that. And these aren't just numbers. These are people. These are family members. These are
Yes,
friends. These are
yes.
neighbors. This is the consequence of such a powerful drug. You know, uh, it's a cheap drug for the traffickers to put into the drug supply. It's a powerful drug. It has a very intense experience to folks that are struggling with substance use disorder, addiction, and it's very addictive. And if I'm a drug trafficker, what do I want? I want a repeat customer. I don't care about your health or safety. They don't think it's about the money. So
Mhm.
if I can give you a powerful drug that's cheap for me to give to you, and I can bring you back as a repeat customer, then it's a win-win. And yeah, I might kill off a couple of my customers, but I'm getting a lot more new customers and a lot more repeat customers. And this is their way of thinking. I know it's absurd. I know it's, even me saying those words out loud, or that doesn't sound rational at all, but this is how
Yeah.
they think and this is how they operate. And unfortunately, they've been very successful at, just really destroying, like I said, families and communities.
Yeah, it does. I have a cousin who lost one of her sons to fentanyl, and I don't think it was accidental fentanyl. And I know that most of these deaths are attributed to accidental. It's not people are trying to overdose on it. They're taking something that's laced with it, not knowing that. Is that correct? And also, is it correct? How long does it take between a person ingesting something and death?
Yeah, so to the first part of your question, the United States government, we classify them as drug overdoses. I think that's an incorrect classification. It's drug poisoning. And
Yes.
I could make a pretty darn good argument that 100% of the people that died for the first 10 years of this crisis had zero clue what fentanyl was. They weren't looking for fentanyl. They were looking for those Adderall pills or their Percocets
Mm.
or methamphetamine or whatever. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing that they were using drugs, but the consequence should not be death. I mean, this is absurd, and so they're being poisoned unbeknownst to them. As far as the second part, how long does that occur? So opioids are very powerful, and a drug like fentanyl is Absolutely. I mean, it when it sits on the receptor, it can if it overwhelms your system, your brain can tell your heart, "Hey, I got this." And your heart will start beating and you go into what's called respiratory depression. And that's when, in fact, some people on the streets will call it the sleepy death. And that's when you just basically close your eyes and you never wake up. This can happen very fast. It really depends on the dosage, your tolerance, body weight. I mean, there's a million factors,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it's a pretty fast process. There are people, you hear reports of, they take half a pill and there's, unbeknownst to them, there's fentanyl in it and they go to sleep and they just never wake up. And,
Yeah.
they lay down, they look like they're just, resting or, going to bed. And it's not the case. Their body's just shutting down and respiratory depression is just shutting down. It's horrible.
Yeah, yeah, it is because it's so fast and like we talked about, it's not that people, the bulk of the people are taking it intentionally. It's just they're taking something. They're taking an Excedrin. They're taking something laced with it. Now, what about the people who are hooked on fentanyl but have not been accidentally poisoned by it? They're like a user. Does it affect them differently? How does that work?
Yeah, so fentanyl is like any other drug in the sense that you build a tolerance. It's alcohol,
Okay.
drugs, anything. The more you use the drug, see, because naturally our brain tries to fight these things off. So you use a drug, I always use alcohol, especially when I talk to like high school or college students.
Okay.
You drink a can of beer and you get that feeling that you like. And you're chasing that feeling because you're like, oh, that felt really good, that buzz or, drunk or whatever you want to call it, right? But
Okay.
internally, to in the simplest terms, your brain is really trying to fight that off because it's
Okay.
just not natural. So your brain is trying to help you, is trying to keep you safe. But you like that feeling. So what do? You drink more and more, right? And then it takes you, let's say the first time you got quote unquote drunk, you were, two or three cans. And then a couple of weeks or a couple months or a couple of years later, maybe it takes you, a couple cases to get that same feeling. That's because your brain is making these changes trying to keep you safe. Drugs are the same way, so is fentanyl. So yeah, only 2 milligrams can kill you, but if you develop a tolerance to this, and it takes more and more to get that same feeling you got, the first or second time you use drugs, you know, um, to the average person looking at you, you're consuming quite a bit amount of fentanyl.
Okay.
And but because you've built that tolerance, it's nothing to you. The danger there, though, is let's just say this person has gotten clean, gone to treatment, something, and then let's say they slide. Let's say for whatever reason, after a month, they relapse, and that's pretty common, unfortunately. Sometimes
Okay.
it takes a lot of attempts at rehab before it breaks through, right? So
Okay.
let's say I've developed an addiction to fentanyl and I go through rehab and a month later I relapse. Um, Now I'm self-medicating myself. A doctor's not saying you need this or you need this. Now I'm on the street going, well, a month ago I was using, I don't know, for easy math, let's say an ounce. That would be pretty high, but let's just for easy math.
Okay.
Well, then I'm like, all right, well, maybe an ounce is too much because I haven't used enough. I'll just take maybe a half ounce. Well, your body is trying to keep you safe and regulate. And now a half ounce might be a lethal dose. And that happens quite a bit as well, where people relapse and they'll die
Yeah,
when
I've heard
when
that.
they go back to using the drug because their body hasn't that their metabolism, their tolerance. I mean, there's so many different factors going on, but hopefully that makes sense. But where it
Yeah.
makes it more dangerous, right? Because now you don't know what you need because there's this fine line. They know they need more than the dose they had, let's say a year or two ago, but 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 they can't be too much because that can kill you. They have to find that, and there's no doctors involved. There's no hospitals involved.
Yeah,
They're doing this on the
for
street.
sure.
You know?
Yeah. And that's so peculiar. And I won't use the word funny because it's not funny, but it's peculiar because they're on fentanyl and they're self-preserving at the same time that, if they relapse, like you're saying, they know to take this much, not to take this much. Because if they take this much, they're going to die. They're self-preserving in a way because they're not looking to die. They don't want to die, They just want to keep up the brain stimulation, I guess.
Yeah, and they're also trying to avoid the sickness. And that's one thing you'll hear a lot is it's
Oh,
called dope being dope sick on the street. And they'll tell you that the withdrawal symptoms are so bad and they're so painful
ooh,
that they have to use the drug. And this is where, I teach this as well. I started teaching it to first responders, but then again, I went into the public with this because a lot of people don't realize the basics of what's happening in the brain, and for a lot of people, and so they don't understand addiction. I still hear it a lot from moms and dads out there who will say, "I just don't understand why my son or daughter can't stop," and it's not as simple as that. Now, if they said, "I can't understand why my son or daughter used the first or second time," okay, there was your choice. But for some people who are struggling in the depths of addiction, substance use disorder, stopping is not a, snap of the hand and you're done. I mean, it's
yes.
really difficult for a lot of people because your brain is saying, "Hey, I need this, and if I don't get it, it's going to be really painful." And there
Okay.
are people who died from dope sickness. I mean, it's hard, and they'll tell you. I saw I remember a clip I saw that I use sometimes in my training, a young lady out of Canada, and she talks about how she goes, "I know I might overdose. I know I might die, but I'm willing to take that risk because the withdrawal symptoms are so bad."
Wow.
And I've had other folks tell me that in person, but that video is really powerful when she talks about the risks that she is knowingly taking because those risks are better in her mind than the pain. That's real.
Wow. If someone goes through, if say, is it possible without without intervention of any kind or uh, recovery house or programs or anything aside, can someone kick that on their own and they just know it's going to be painful? Are they okay on the other side of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what complicates this whole issue is because there are people out there who, well, first of all, there's people out there who on a Sunday night can use drugs and on a Monday morning they're off to work, no problem. You wouldn't even know it. And then
Wow.
there are people who use it once and the life just starts to spiral down the drain immediately, right? And then there are people who have trouble going through rehab, who relapse a lot. And then there are people who can just literally say, "I'm done."
Wow.
And it's mind-boggling, and that makes it, uh, that makes it more complicating to people who don't understand what's going on because they were like, "Well, Brian over there just said snapped his hands and he's done," but Michelle is, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
we might react totally different to how the drugs are impacting us. So it's more confusing to folks who don't really understand what's going on. It's confusing to me, and I think I have a pretty good grasp of what's going
Yeah.
on.
You have a lot of experience. So can you share a we'll call it a success story of somebody that you saw along the way that was horribly addicted that got free and cleaned up their life and you saw the process.
Yeah, I've seen it firsthand. I've known people firsthand, and then I've met just numerous people in that exact same bucket. And I love that. I've done a lot of podcasts, and I've done some with folks that are in long-term recovery, and just that where I mean, they not only were they struggling with drug addiction most of their lives, they were incarcerated for much of their lives, and
Yes.
now they're clean, they have families, they have kids, they have jobs, they're giving back to their community in some meaningful way, and I think that's such a beautiful thing, and it shows hope, and it shows that we shouldn't give up on people, especially at their darkest times. We got to extend the hand, and let them know that we're there for them. I've seen that in my own career. People I know who have, just struggled, and again, just like the folks who I've since met, they just found a way to power through it in a productive way, and it's a beautiful thing when there's hope. There really is. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and people, I think people need to know that
Yeah.
there is light at the end of the tunnel because you're addicted, because you have a daughter or a son that's addicted, whoever they are, or just a family member in general, that there is hope because you don't see the hope when you're in the middle of it. You only see what you see, and you see the hopelessness of the lifestyle, and you think this couldn't ever possibly change. But there is hope. And I
Absolutely.
think people need that desperately.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And just having some empathy and understanding and it goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you tell, and then this is the last question, unless you have anything else to share about this, and then we're going to turn a corner into the Eagle Six training. But you've seen many, many, I mean, countless parents, I'll just say parents, that have lost a son or a daughter to accidental fentanyl use. What can people possibly say? What are the best things to say and the worst things to say to those parents who are eaten up with grief and sorrow?
I think just being there for them, letting them know that there's a stigma to folks who struggle with drugs and who go through this. And there are a lot of families who may not even share that. And I get that, it's really no one's business. But if they do share it with you, well then, don't turn your back to them, just be there and say, hey, we're friends. What can I do for you? Can I pray for you? Can I bring you dinner? Can I just be someone you need to listen to or who can listen to you? Just don't abandon that friendship if they share a real struggle with you. Um, they just want to know that, well, it's tough. It really is. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to who've lost sons or daughters, and sometimes I don't know what to say to them. Sometimes they just need a hug. Sometimes they just need to know that that there's people out there who do care, and if I can take, I gotta tell you, a lot of these folks motivate me in such a powerful way. If I can take the information they gave me and what they shared with me and the personal experiences, and I can somehow route that into my instruction and get out there in front of people, especially young people, and and get them to hear that message, and then not make those fatal choices, and maybe share some of that information with their circle of influence, whether they're
Mhm.
friends, family, whoever. Then and that's what we have to do, right? We just have to make any positive change we can.
Yeah, and I think everybody handles it differently. So some there's a saying, your pain becomes your purpose, and the people take their pain and that they're the mouthpiece now and they share. And there's some who just prefer to keep it private because of the stigma you talked about, and the least people that know, the less amount of people that know, the better. So it's just a matter of individual how people deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably the only person in this space, if you will, the only nonprofit in this space who didn't lose a personal family member to fentanyl.
Wow.
And I get asked that a lot. Then what's your interest? Who cares? And I think it's wonderful that families have developed nonprofits and go into schools and talk to whoever they can as a way of spreading the message, hopefully preventing that type of pain in other families. Nothing against that. I think that's a wonderful outlet of their grief, and but I trying to take a different approach here. I literally, I think I'm the only person in this nonprofit space who doesn't have a close connection. I have friends. I have,
Yeah.
a lot of folks in my life now who've struggled, you know, either struggle with it or they've lost a son or daughter to it. Um, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I know that my background, my experience, the things that I've seen in my life will put people in the seats. And if
Mhm.
I can educate them, empower them with information,
Yeah.
whether it's a parent or an adult who can take this information back and share it and be a force multiplier, as I call them, or whether it's a young person who can say, all right, now I'm armed with good information. Now, when I'm in that situation, maybe I'll say no, or maybe I'll find an alternative to this type of behavior. And then I get those things happen, like I've had kids come up to me. Uh, I remember a college student. I spoke to about 500 college kids, and about a month later, I was at the same school for an unrelated event I wasn't even speaking at. And a lot of these kids will recognize me because I was the speaker, right? Of course, I don't know them. And one particular student walked up to me and said he had anyway, he shared some really, really personal information with me about how he was making really bad choices in his life, and I gave him information to make him think, and he was seeking help and uh, and hadn't used drugs in the last couple weeks since I'd seen him, and just I mean I could tell you a million stories like that, but those are the ones that really move me. Those are the ones that really motivate me, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, that is a motivator, and it's not it's a good thing that you have not been personally affected by it. You don't have to be personally affected by it. I've just started volunteering for a local sex trafficking organization. I have not been personally affected, nor anybody I know, but it's that burden that, and you see the devastation of that, and the same thing with fentanyl. It's just you see that and you're doing something about it, and you have what, 20 plus 25, 28 years of DEA behind you to, so you come at it with compassion and education and experience.
That's the hope. I have this. It's not my line. I'm sure you've heard it before. Be the change in this world you want to see. And I remember the first time I ever heard that, probably decades ago. It just really resonated with me. And like I said, I've always felt like my purpose in this life was to serve people, and I did that through law enforcement. Now I do it this way, and it just keeps me going.
Yeah.
It gives me a sense of purpose.
Yeah, it does. And I thought of, before we turn the corner, I have one more question.
Sure.
And this is part of that, is what would you tell young people, young adults, because that seems to be the largest population that are accidentally overdosing or accidentally being poisoned. What would you tell them as precautions? Never do what? A, B, and C.
Well, one thing I always tell them is, hey, like it or not, your drug supply is different than your parents. It's just the reality of it. Because I've had parents tell me that before. Well, when I was a teenager, it was a rite of passage. I used drugs, blah, 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 blah. And somehow that's acceptable for their children because then they don't want to look hypocritical if they tell their kids to say no. And it blows me away. And how I counter that is we just talk about the drug supply. I mean, the drug supply is much different. So tell kids that. I mean, even marijuana 10 years ago was very much different than the marijuana on the streets today. I mean, it's not even the same thing. So now you have a drug supply with a drug in it called fentanyl that can kill you in little tiny, tiny doses. And there's many things I do, but I think the size and the impact that this one drug has had really opens their eyes. I take a sugar packet. A sugar packet is typically 1 gram. Most sugar packets.
Hmm.
1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. If only 2 milligrams is a deadly dose, then that means that sugar packet, if it were fentanyl, would have 500 deadly doses in it. So sometimes I'll even take that sugar packet and I'll actually pour it into a little glass vial.
Okay.
And I'll say, that's right here, it can kill 500 people. And usually that's about, bigger than the student body or how many folks I'm talking to. So, and sometimes I'll even pass it out. I want you to look how small can just literally wipe out your entire school, and so I want them to physically, see what,
Yeah.
what impact it's having at such a small amounts. And,
Okay.
and the fact that it's just polluted our entire illicit drug supply. It's scary.
Yeah. And would you tell them, if they have a headache, if they have an owie of some type, do not take any kind of Excedrin, ibuprofen, whatever it is, do not accept that from anybody, anywhere, ever.
I always tell them if it's not from a real doctor, from a real pharmacist, not some, getmydrugs.com or something silly like that, then absolutely don't take it. Especially young people, I know like in college campuses I travel to, around exam time, this time of the year, we see more Xanax, we see certain types of drugs increase. So unfortunately, they don't want to go to mom and dad and ask. So they go online or they go to their local, whoever in the dorm selling dope and you just don't know what you're getting. You have zero clue what you're getting. I can promise you it's not Xanax. I can promise you it's not Adderall or Perk or whatever you're being told. I've seen enough of these lab reports. I can tell you that it's going to have fentanyl, it's going to have meth, it's going to have xylazine, it's going to have, you know, caffeine or baby powder. I mean, I'm telling you, these traffickers will put anything in these pills if it means you giving them 5, 10, $20.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. And I also was looking up all of the street names for fentanyl. The only one I knew was Fetty. The
Yeah,
only one.
that's
But I mean, there's dozens and dozens of street names for fentanyl, depending on a whole bunch of different, things.
yeah, yeah, and geographical area, locations, things like that, and yeah, it's a whole subculture.
It really is. So we're going to turn, thank you for sharing about all that because I think awareness is such a powerful tool. And I think that people knowing what it is, knowing how little it takes and all that just helps, and maybe helping know the signs. And I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, so you'll whoever is viewing this will be able to check out Brian's websites. So let me see. Okay, I'm scrolling through. Okay, I want to cover this. You
Sure.
were featured on an A&E show, Undercover, Caught on Tape, Small Towns, Big Crimes, and you integrate your narrative with actionable leadership lessons. What was that about?
So about 20, a little over 20 years ago, I was involved in a investigation where I was able to insert myself as an undercover and meet a couple cartel members. We actually met in a hotel right outside of Dallas, Texas. And it was that particular investigation was methamphetamine and marijuana.
Hmm,
And those two individuals were on the marijuana part of the organization.
okay.
And I had a target who was able to, or he was bringing in hundreds and hundreds of pounds of marijuana a month into the US. And then from there, it'd be distributed to multiple states, primarily in the Midwest. And,
Mhm.
long story short, we were able to remove him and insert myself as the buyer. And I was able to convince them to meet me at a hotel room and bring me a couple 100 pounds of marijuana. And we had it, of course, we try to video these operations and maintain that video. And A&E was looking for federal agents who were involved in undercover operations, and I submitted the stuff, and it worked out. Yeah, it was fun. It was episode one. I'm sorry,
Oh,
season one, episode 6.
okay, so somebody can look that up and find it and watch it, and yeah.
It's the last 20 minutes of episode 6. Yeah.
Okay, I'll watch it. I'll look that up.
One of the things I did with that is I do leadership discussions, and a lot of folks will ask me about my career in DEA, and they always want to hear war stories. And
Sure.
war stories are fun, but if you pay money or you're at a conference, you want some actionable, information.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to tell my story with a lot of cuts, a lot of breaks in it, and then say, okay,
Yeah.
this is how it applies to leadership,
Exactly.
adapting to the situation, strategically thinking, planning about, how we're going to do this operation. I mean, I really try to make it practical and, some takeaways there.
Well, yeah, and one of your speeches that you give is leadership lessons from an undercover narc. And so you do that and you combine the two. So talk about a little bit about how you do that and what leadership means to you and what you teach, and what are those, a few of those actionable steps that we can sink our teeth into?
Yeah, I literally just tell a little bit of the story, and then I pause, and then I show you how that little bit of my, true story is applicable into the leadership realm. And it's pretty basic. And that's one thing about my leadership training I'll say is I really try not to get advanced, and I do that intentionally.
Mhm.
I really think leadership is a basic principle that we can all understand if we're willing to look at it
Yeah.
from a couple different angles. And the three angles that I always share are: number one is that it's intentional. We throw around the word leadership a lot when we talk about
Yeah.
people in certain positions, political leaders, organizational leaders. And I think that's a disservice to what leadership is. Just because you have a bigger office or a business card that says, director or CEO or, boss or whatever, doesn't mean you're a leader. So we talk about the
Yes.
intentional aspect of leadership. And then from there, I flow into that leadership is impactful. So let's say you've taken a position of authority in your organization. You're the first line supervisor, mid-level, you own a company, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Everything you do and everything you don't do is going to have an impact. And you're
Yes.
being watched, whether you
Yes.
like it or whether you agree with it or not. It's the reality. So things you say, the things you convey, your body language, I mean, everything is going to have an impact. So you got to understand that powerful impact and how it how it plays into the efficiency of your organization. And we'll dive deep into that. I mean, I'll look at, I always look at studies, and depending on who I'm talking to, for law enforcement, for instance. So one of the first studies I always look at is the Gallup. Gallup does a thing every year called workplace effectiveness.
Mm.
And they've been doing it for, I don't know, 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's like 12 questions they ask, and then they give a percentage on what level of the American workplace is, engaged at work,
Yes. Yeah.
somewhat engaged, actively disengaged. And then if you dive deep into the report, they talk about what really puts them into those buckets. It's their
Mhm.
supervisors. It's their leadership, quote unquote.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'll dive from there. I'll go into some things at DEA and things that are specific to law enforcement where we're seeing the same thing. And um, the impact that or your effectiveness at work is really impacted by who you work for. That's just the reality of it.
Hmm.
When I do consulting or if I go into an organization and I see low morale, then guess what? I know there's going to be some bad bosses in there. 100%.
Yes. And
If
people that saying people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses is is so true. I've done it myself because I can't do this. I love
yeah,
my work environment. I love what I do. I cannot deal with them.
I
And
agree. And if you look at all the metrics, and we talk about this too, I like diving into this. If you look at all the metrics, and I mean like employee theft, sick time,
yes.
grievances, people that leave the day they can, or like you said, just leave in general, looking for a
Yeah.
greener pasture. Every single one of those metrics are higher in a bad way when you have bosses that are toxic. When you have
Yes.
bosses that aren't leaders, right? So
Yes.
talk about that, and then you think about I have met people who have taken jobs paying less money in the same field
Yes.
because they're so happy with who they work with.
Yes.
And it's and I always turn it around. It's okay, so you know how happy you are when you were working this in this situation. Well, then if you ever become someone with authority, why wouldn't you emulate that behavior? Why wouldn't
Yes.
you understand the impact that it has on you? Therefore, you should understand the impact they can have on others if you take this position. And the
Yes.
same thing with if you're a bad boss, right? Or a good boss. Anyway, it's
Yes.
same thing. Good bosses keep good employees. Bad bosses, make good employees bad or ineffective.
Yeah,
Um,
and the turnover under a bad leadership, under a bad boss that has no idea how to lead is just that costs the company time and money. There's such a cost to that rather than And I don't think bosses with no leadership skills are self-aware enough to know that they're not a leader because they have the boss title. As you said, that they have a title, but they have no idea how to lead people and motivate their staff to do better and to correct positively. There's a way, to correct and to, you're gonna make mistakes and you
Yeah,
be corrected, but it's being demeaned and corrected versus being browbeaten and corrected.
100%. I absolutely agree. And that culture is really, I mean, the impact that the bosses have on the culture is so, it's like fentanyl. It's just so profound, and I think that's one reason is, we're talking about two different subjects here, right? We fentanyl and then we're talking about leadership. But from my perspective,
Yes.
I see so many parallels, so many,
Wow.
because ultimately we're trying to help people and trying to give them information here. On
Yes.
this one, I'm trying to make them better, make them more effective, share with them some basic principles that if they really think about and they really agree to, they're going to be better. They're going to be more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can someone, like, I'm a solopreneur. I work by myself, but I have a team of, in the book and publishing realm, I have cover designers and editors and, everything on my team. They all work independently. So, and this is a kind of a tongue-in-cheek question. Do I have to be a boss? Do I have to be, am I a leader of myself? Because I'm a solopreneur. I don't lead anybody. Nobody's following. Nobody, like how do you deal with that type of situation? Because a
Yeah,
lot are like me.
no, absolutely. I love that because that actually feeds into the third principle that I always talk
Okay,
about.
perfect.
Complete coincidence is I believe that everything starts with oneself. You have to look in the mirror. So whether whether you have 18 people under you in the same physical building or whether you're, an entrepreneur, how can you ever get better? How can you ever move forward and be more productive if you're not willing to look in the mirror and say, this is what I do
Yes.
well, this is what I don't do well. I think of a story. There was a company out east. I actually this was prior to me probably even being alive. This was a long time ago, but I was working with them later on, years later, and they had a company that had just a toxic environment, absolutely toxic environment. I mean, people would literally their onboarding would come in, and then 20 minutes later they're outside. I mean, they're gone, they're done, right? And so there was a fear that this organization was going to go under. So they brought a leadership consultant in. The first thing he did is I want every single manager in this whole organization in a room. So he puts them all in a room and gives them a piece of paper, gives them each a piece of paper and a pen and says, I want you to write down what's wrong with this organization. And, from my understanding, they were all kind of joking, saying there's not enough ink in this pen and, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, after however so many minutes, he stops and pulls out a $100 bill. And he says, all right, I have $100 for anyone who said themselves. And to me, that's a really powerful lesson because maybe it is us that's wrong with the organization or wrong with,
Mhm.
our, entrepreneurship or whatever hat we're wearing in life. Maybe I'm the barrier, right? Maybe there's something that I can do to improve myself. So I think that's applicable, like you said, if someone who's working by themselves or someone who has, a staff of, a plethora of people under them. Um, the other analogy I use is I travel a lot. I'm on a plane a lot, which I love to fly. And I know people
Yeah.
don't listen to it, but if you ever listen to the safety briefing that the flight attendant gives you, they
Yes.
say if the cabin pressure should drop, a mask will fall from the ceiling. Put it on, help yourself before you help others. And I think that is so applicable to leadership and to life. I don't care if you have 18 babies surrounding you. If you don't put that mask on yourself, you're not going to be able to help them.
Mhm.
So how can, if your idea is to, be successful, whatever metric that is, make more money, have more clients, however you measure that,
Yeah.
how can you accomplish that if you're not willing to look at yourself and say, okay, I'm very good doing this. I need to continue to do it. I'm
Yes.
a little weak here. I can definitely strength here. And then this right here, this bucket here, oh my goodness, this is the bad stuff. This is going to
Yeah.
keep away from me. I need to figure out how I can, how I can move that further away. And oh goodness. I think it's simple. I really do. People just don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people have to be mindful too when they work for a corporation, a big organization, because, I can tell an anonymous personal story is that I was hired for one role for my strengths, which are people skills and connecting and all that, and client, uh, interaction and all that. And the role became reporting and analytics and spreadsheets. And it was like my worst nightmare. And I struggled and struggled and struggled until I was let go because I could see it. I was looking for another job. The person could in charge could see it and just, it just was a lose-lose situation. And so I love what you said about the buckets because I want to stay as far away from that, that reporting analytics bucket, and
Yeah.
all that, so remember those problems that I don't know, you probably had them too. Those horrible story problems where the train is coming at one speed and the other train, and I just didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable on the train. Did they need to eat? Could I cook for them? It was just like that's how my mind works. And so I just don't want to, deal with that analytical bucket, even though I overthink things. I'm not good at the analytical part. And so, I think it's important as leaders, and maybe you can confirm this, to stay in your lane, stay in your strengths as much as possible. Well, we all have stuff we got to do, that we don't enjoy, but stay away from that horrible pile of
Yeah.
manure bucket. Is
Newer bucket. I love that. No, you're absolutely right. It's about understanding what our strengths are. And I think that's also part if you're in an organization, it's also part of the management's, job is to say, okay, she is better at this, not as good at this. He is good at, you know what I mean? And
yes.
in building that environment, and maybe there's some resources, maybe there's some tools, maybe there's someone else that can take this particular task on,
Mhm.
or maybe, you know what I mean? Like giving here and taking here. It's about, about creating that culture where you're getting the best of all your employees because you
Yes.
understand what buttons work,
Yes.
what no, I absolutely agree with you. It all makes sense to me. I just wish more and more organizations would just think about it from a common sense perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll finish up with this. What are like the top three ways someone can improve their leadership skills?
Well, one is understanding my three concepts.
Yes.
That leadership's intentional, it's impactful, and it starts with yourself. I think there's some skills we can all work on. Communication skills is probably it's interesting. One of the things I do in my leadership training, and I've been doing this for years now, is I always ask, what are traits of a good leader? Not a good boss, not a good
Yes.
manager, but a good leader. And I've been writing this down for years now. And one of the things I see consistently is communication. And we can dive into that, like, is it when people hear communication, they just think it's, us speaking, but there's so many more factors. How am I listening to you? Am I actively listening to you? Am I
Yeah.
understanding with intent to yeah, yeah,
You know.
exactly. So the body language,
Mhm.
am I listening to you because I want to respond to you, or am I listening to you because I want to understand you and then respond to you? So I think if you really work on your leadership skills, being authentic, building that relationship, building trust between you and the person that you're communicating with. Oh my goodness, you can really knock down barriers and walls and move forward together. And I think that's a beautiful thing. God, there's so many other. My answer goes off so many other avenues there. Emotional intelligence. That's really communication. You know, you and
Yes.
I, we talk, I have a baseline of what to expect from you. And then, one day maybe you're not talking a whole lot. Maybe some of the things you say, maybe is everything okay, Michelle? Like just have an understanding of who you are and knowing something's off. and then being there
Yes.
for you and saying, "Hey, is everything good? Do you need any help? Can I do something for you? Just and I think it all goes back to communication and just and finally, I guess I do have a third. Just be a decent human being.
Yeah.
Just
Being
not
real, but like you said, authentic, being yourself.
Yes, yes, because everyone knows who the fake people are. You can spot them from a mile, right? And just be authentic, be real, be genuine, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to build amazing relationships because of it. Oh,
Yeah,
relationship building. Oh my goodness. That's another one. We could go on and on and on. I mean,
exactly. That's
it's
another podcast, just relationship building, because there's all
yes.
kinds of dynamics with that.
Ooh, absolutely. But if you do everything else, you'll build relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to share on either topic we talked about today before we end our time? Anything you want people to know
You know what?
about you and about your work?
I just looked over. We have a conference coming up in the Kansas City metro area. It's in Overland Park, Kansas, which is,
Okay, hold it up a little bit higher.
nope.
Okay, perfect.
It's May 19th and 20th in
Okay,
Overland Park, Kansas, which is Kansas City metro area.
okay,
And it's our second annual drug summit we put on by Only 2MG. And we're going to have, gosh, 10, 11, 12 national speakers on a variety of topics. We're limited to 300 people at our this particular venue.
okay,
Um, I'm excited. It's going to be if you're in the Midwest or if you want to. Last year we had people travel from all across the U.S. So if you want to listen to really good, relevant information on a variety of topics related to drugs,
okay.
not all just fentanyl or anything like that,
Yeah,
then 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 come on out.
that's great. Is there a link to that event?
I need to put it on the website, but our website's only2mg.com. So www.only2, just the number, it's not spelled out, and then mg.com. So only2mg.com. So that's the information. We'll eventually get that up on there and we'll have a
Okay,
registration link on there. My
perfect.
contact information is on there. I love talking to people. Um, Look, if your organization can't afford it, don't let money get in the way. I self-fund a lot of this stuff. I don't have a money tree that I can shake, but I will find a way.
If you find it, I want to know about it.
Yeah,
The money
yeah.
tree
Oh,
thing.
yeah, I think a lot of people do. But I've had organizations say, we want you to come out, but we really don't have much of a budget. Okay, tell me where you are and when you want me, and we'll
Yeah,
make it work. If you have
great.
a budget, wonderful. Make a nonprofit donation, and that'll help me go to somebody else who doesn't have a budget. But uh, don't don't not do this because of money. Let's figure out a way to make this work. The information is too important, and we need to save more lives. And the only way we're going to do it is to share information. So get a hold of me and let's talk.
Yeah, I love that because that really shows your heart. It's not all about money and the dollar, and you have to pay me $5,000 because I don't speak unless you pay me.
Oh gosh, no.
It's not about that at all. It's about your passion for getting the information out, for educating, for saving lives. Ultimately.
That's the plan. That's the hope. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's great. Brian, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking your time to talk with me and educate people. And I'm just really thankful that you agreed to this.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. It was a fun conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. And until next time, everybody, thank you for watching another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.